So if I asked you, what is the most dangerous food, what would you say? Maybe it would be something like candy or fast food, which definitively are linked to cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, which combined contribute to over 40% of all deaths in America. But if you wanted to talk about short-term illness, you might say something like lettuce or papayas or strawberries or eggs, all of which have been linked to short-term illness outbreaks such as Salmonella or E. coli. Yet despite all this, there's one food in particular that's been deemed so dangerous that it's illegal in many states. You might think that it could cause immediate and uncontrollable catastrophe the moment you put it into your mouth if it's so dangerous as to be made illegal, when all these other foods are totally fine. Surely it would have to kill hundreds or thousands of people a year. And if you thought this, of course, you would be totally wrong. The food I'm talking about is raw milk, and that's what I'm going to discuss in today's video. Just so we're on the same page, raw milk is milk that's been unpasteurized. Most milk that comes from the store, after it gets milked from the cow, is heated to kill any unwanted bacteria and to make it safe for human consumption. Obviously, this is a relatively new phenomenon. Milk has been drunk raw for the past 10,000 years, ever since we started cattle domestication, and pasteurization was invented in the early 1900s. The reason I'm talking about this now is because earlier today, I went to this talk by Professor Joe Heckman from Rutgers, who was giving a speech about the political state of raw milk in New Jersey. Raw milk is illegal in New Jersey, as it's been since the 1970s, and if you saw my previous video on driving to Pennsylvania in order to be able to buy raw milk, well, now you know that's why. Anyway, I'm making this video to try to give an overview of why I think it's pretty crazy that such a thing is illegal in this country. To start off, what is something that all mammals have in common? Is it that they have fur? Is it that they have 4 legs? The primary defining feature, actually, that biologists use to classify mammals is the fact that they all give milk to their young. That's why we're called mammals. Mammal, mammary, that's the same root as like the word for breast or udder, essentially. What that means is every single mammal, since the invention of mammals over 60 million years ago, has been nurtured from birth up until early maturity, exclusively by milk from its mother, in particular raw milk from its mother. Think about that for a sec. That means the one thing that makes you a mammal, or the most significant thing at least, is the fact that you were, or at least you might have been, nursed by your mother after being born. I think that's a pretty solid reason why it makes sense that at least human babies would drink human milk. But a lot of people will say, oh, but we're the only species that drinks the milk of other animals while we're adults. Well, okay, not really. That's not true. If you talk to any farmer who has cows, you'll know that the cats and the dogs, when given the opportunity while the farmer's milking their cow, they'll drink milk straight from the udder of the cow. Pigs have been known to drink milk from cows if they're given the opportunity. The thing is that in nature, that opportunity doesn't really exist. Also, sure, humans are the only animals to systematically harvest the milk of other animals for consumption to adulthood. But we're also the only animals that harvest vegetables and plants and meat. Should we not eat those because other animals don't do that either? I mean, that's a crazy argument. And that brings me to my next point, which is humans have adapted to eat milk into adulthood. It's been shown that certain populations of humans have developed gene mutations that allow them to produce lactase into adulthood, which is direct evidence that they're able to digest milk into adulthood. Moreover, since milk is the substance that takes all mammals from being a baby into maturity, which is to say that it's among the most nutrient-dense and productive foods that any mammal can eat, any human that had an adaptation which allowed him or her to drink milk into adulthood would have been very well adapted to survive in any environment. And so the ability to digest milk is strongly selected for throughout evolutionary history. And we see this based on the proliferation of the civilizations and societies in which drinking raw milk was a big component of their diet. So, okay, whatever, history is history, maybe you don't buy any of this. Now, if raw milk is dangerous, it obviously would have to be dangerous because it caused certain undesirable outcomes. So now let's go over these outcomes. First, chronic disease. Raw milk has never been shown to contribute significantly to any chronic disease, whether cancer or diabetes or heart disease. Moreover, there are foods that have been linked to those illnesses, which cause hundreds of thousands of deaths a year. Those foods would be things like fast food and junk food and sugar and candy and all that fun stuff. Point is, as a country, we do have foods that we know contribute to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people a year, and these are legal. Raw milk has no such connection, so therefore it doesn't really make sense to argue for its illegality based on chronic disease. Okay, so we talked about chronic disease. What about acute illness? Sure, there have been cases where raw milk has led to people getting a foodborne illness, but there are also cases where lettuce and strawberries and papayas and mangoes and eggs and spinach and countless other foods have led to people getting foodborne illnesses. Yet all of those foods remain legal. One of the issues that most food producers are aware of is the fact that food safety is directly dependent on the quality of how it was produced. Lettuce isn't inherently dangerous, yet some lettuce is because it's produced in a way that allows for the proliferation of E. coli. In fact, one of the primary reasons why pasteurization started to begin with was because dairy producers in the early 20th century used such terrible farming practices and fed cows such horrible food, and the cows were so sickly and unhealthy that the milk that they produced was pretty much toxic. And one of the ways to fix that problem, instead of the actual good solution of feeding the cows better, they chose the cheaper solution of pasteurizing the milk. And that's pretty much the origin of milk pasteurization today. Obviously, that's not a good solution. The milk is still crappy, but it was just a band-aid that they could slap on the problem at the time, and it kind of worked. However, nowadays food standards are so much higher that the real need for pasteurization in that sense doesn't exist anymore. We produce dairy that's of such high quality. Rates of illness outbreaks from raw milk are on the wholesale decline, despite the fact that more people consume it every year because it's made legal in more states and more people are becoming aware about it. Furthermore, it's not as if pasteurization even fixes things. There have been plenty of outbreaks of salmonella and other diseases due to pasteurized milk, so it's not as if pasteurization even fixes the purported problem to begin with. Regardless, that's not even the point. If I want to go and get myself sick all I want, that's kind of the idea. That's the whole point of a free country. Candy is legal, booze is legal, junk food is legal, you're allowed to eat all that, and you could probably end up in the hospital getting triple bypass surgery eventually if you eat too much junk food and you become obese. So, if that's the case and you're allowed to make those decisions in this country, then why shouldn't I be able to make a decision that could potentially cause me to get, a stomach upset for a few days? So, we've covered the chronic disease issue, we've covered acute illness issue. Lastly, and I don't want to get into too much depth here in the specifics, but there's been plenty of anecdotal and data-driven evidence to suggest that raw milk, in fact, does actually have positive health benefits. Anyway, so that's all I have for now. The point of this is not to convince you to drink raw milk, you can do whatever you want, but rather to illustrate why it's so crazy that a food such as this is illegal when plenty of other things, which are far more damaging to people, and provably so, are freely allowed to be consumed with no consequences. I hope you found this interesting and informative, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.